I just noticed an important looking document on your desk and called in a rush. You need it today, don't you? The person on the other end was Stephen, the manager who always seemed to target Emily. Yes, but we just talked about handling documents more carefully, didn't we? Well, it's probably too late now anyway. His tone sounded as if he'd waited to call until he was sure it was too late for the meeting. Though it was only his voice over the phone, I could easily imagine his smug smile. That's. Emily looked at me, hesitating with her words. What am I supposed to do now? Interpreting complex matters like this on the spot, only someone fluent in English could pull it off. Fluent in English? Suddenly, Mr. Nash's face lit up, as though he'd just had an idea. Mr. Nash? Emily tilted her head slightly, looking at him with curiosity. Emily, we have someone here who's fluent in English. I meet the gaze of Mr. Nash. He looks directly at me and says, Sean, I need your help. My name is Sean. In my 40s now, my waistline has become a bit more noticeable, something that never used to bother me. My current job is as a driver for the president of a household goods company. Every morning, I drive to the president's home, then take him to the office or to his business appointments. In the fast-paced world of household goods, keeping up with consumer needs is no easy feat. The company I drive for, Taro Corporation, has gained some attention on social media recently. Though not a major player, it's well known in its field, and with social media's rise, its performance has grown steadily. Mr. Nash, the president I drive for, is about my age but keeps fit, is tall, and carries himself with style. He has an easygoing charm and is hard to forget once you meet him. I, on the other hand, am often told, you look familiar, even though it's usually by people I've never met. In other words, I have one of those faces that blends in anywhere. One day, when I picked up Mr. Nash for his usual workday, he handed me a small wrapped package. Mr. Nash? What's this? Take it. A client gave it to me, but I don't need more of these. I unwrapped it and found a small golden cat figurine. It might look cute on a desk, but as a man in my 40s, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Unfortunately, as a driver, I don't even have my own desk at work. Thank you. Noticing my hesitant reaction, Mr. Nash raised an eyebrow and said, Try looking a bit more appreciative. By the way, it's supposedly made of pure gold. What? I was startled and almost dropped a cat figurine, but my reaction seemed to amuse Mr. Nash, who chuckled as he got into the car. After carefully putting the cat figurine in my pocket, I closed the back door. Like most companies, President has a secretary responsible for managing the president's schedule and other tasks. Mr. Nash is no exception, and the person who rides with him most frequently in the company car I drive is his secretary, Emily. Emily is a talented, beautiful young woman who was selected as Mr. Nash's secretary early in her career. With a strong sense of responsibility, she anticipates tasks well in advance, although she's quite reserved and not much of a talker. Because of her quiet nature, she isn't the type to confront others, even when she overhears whispers about herself from colleagues. I haven't personally heard any comments, but rumor has it that Emily is disliked by her supervisor in the secretary department, Stephen. When Mr. Nash's former secretary retired, he personally chose Emily to take on the role. At the time, Stephen, who was an experienced senior secretary, probably didn't appreciate this decision, as Emily was a rookie with only about a year of experience at the company. I can understand Stephen's reasoning that someone with more experience should have the job, but he's still complaining, even though it was Mr. Nash's own decision. At that time, Stephen was still an assistant manager, but he was later promoted to manager and took on the responsibility of overseeing the department. However, he seems to have a naturally persistent personality. He still appears to treat Emily rather harshly. Even though Emily is Mr. Nash's secretary, she doesn't stick to him constantly. She spends much of her time at her desk handling office work. Working in an uncomfortable environment within her own department must be a big source of stress for her. Stephen often speaks to Emily in a harsh tone. Emily, being cautious, rarely makes big mistakes, but everyone slips up sometimes. Other colleagues would typically get off with a simple "be careful next time," but only Emily is always criticized by Stephen excessively. Colleagues are too afraid to stand up for her, fearing that defending her might put them in Stephen's bad books. They'll chat with her when he's not around, but it seems no one is willing to shield her from him. That day, on the way to a client, Mr. Nash asked me to make a quick stop, so I pulled over. "Wait here a minute," he instructed, leaving me and Emily waiting in the car. Emily, usually so calm, looked somewhat down that day and sighed quietly. "Are you okay? You seem a bit tired." "Huh? Oh, is it that obvious?" When I spoke to her, Emily responded in a flustered manner. "Oh. No, I didn't mean you looked tired, more like, I just sensed it." I realized too late that mentioning her appearance might be rude and tried to cover it up. Do I really look that bad? Stephen had a lot to say to me earlier. Of course, Stephen was the reason. Did he give you a hard time again? Sometimes, like today, Mr. Nash leaves Emily and me in the car while he goes off to handle his own errands. During those times, I usually chat with Emily while we wait, and naturally, the conversation often turns to matters related to the secretary department. Emily's sighs are nearly always caused by Stephen. This morning, I was looking over the minutes from our meeting when Mr. Nash called me, so I left my seat. I just put the notes in my desk drawer. Emily, the president's secretary, always prioritizes the president above all in her work. She constantly puts her own administrative tasks on hold, which I think must be a tough job. Minutes are confidential, but I plan to file them in the cabinet as soon as I got back. She explained that Mr. Nash always keeps meetings brief, so even when called, she's not gone long. But even those brief moments don't escape Stephen's notice. "When you got back, Stephen was waiting for you." Yeah, it was barely a couple of minutes, but Stephen told me it doesn't matter if it's 1 minute or 2. I shouldn't have left those confidential documents outside the cabinet. I could almost picture Stephen's smug face. It's like he's on a mission to spot even the smallest of her mistakes. But they were in your drawer, right? Leaving them out might be bad, but for a couple of minutes, and with no one around. We rarely have outside visitors to our department, but even so, it wasn't the right thing to do. I know it was my fault, but when he keeps pushing, it really makes me down. It seems Stephen has made it his mission to never miss an opportunity to find fault with Emily. He's practically satisfied to make her feel small over the tiniest things. Maybe you should talk to Mr. Nash about it sometime? I doubt anyone in the department would dare call Stephen out on his attitude. I started to worry that if this situation continued, Emily might eventually reach her breaking point. No. I can't just bring something like this up to Mr. Nash. I just need to step up and work flawlessly so even Stephen can't find any faults. From what I could see, Emily handled her work exceptionally well, and I'd never seen Mr. Nash criticize her about anything. On the contrary, he was often quite proud when a client would compliment his assistant. Really? Well, if things do get out of hand, leaning on others could be an option. Better to avoid anything irreversible. You're right, but I'd still like to try a bit longer on my own. She gave me a smile as she said it. I wondered if I'd somehow pressured her into saying that, but honestly, all I could do at that moment was listen. Got it. Just don't overdo it, okay? Thank you. Just then, Mr. Nash returned to the car, having finished his errands. Oh, Emily, do you have today's contract with Goodness? Goodness was the industry's largest lifestyle goods manufacturer and clearly a market leader. They were about to launch a major project with Taro Corporation. Today was the day we'd head to Goodness headquarters for the contract signing. Yes, of course. I've never handled a $10 million deal before. It's definitely nerve-wracking. But as she rummaged through her bag, I saw her expression turn pale. Well, I have the English files. Emily? Excuse me. Please give me a moment. Her tense tone changed the atmosphere in the car in an instant. She frantically overturned her bag, but it seemed that what she was looking for wasn't there. No way, I was sure I'd put it in here. Staring blankly into her bag, Emily's voice sounded dazed. Apparently, the critical documents for the $10 million deal were nowhere to be found. Even Mr. Nash looked momentarily speechless in shock. But at the same time, I wondered, would someone as meticulous as Emily really make such a mistake? I'd watched Emily and Mr. Nash head off to meetings like this several times, and nothing like this had ever happened before. Emily, being as responsible as she was, always said she'd double-check her bag to avoid any slip-ups. Yet, I reminded myself that Emily was only human, so mistakes are possible. As I thought back to our earlier conversation, Stephen's face came to mind, but even if he disliked her, could he really sabotage such a crucial company project? When's the meeting scheduled? I turned to ask, and she replied, looking paler than ever. It's at 1 p.m., but we're not going to make it back in time. The clock showed 12:30. There was no way we'd make it back to the office in time. Emily looked at Mr. Nash with tears in her eyes. Mr. Nash, I lost the critical file. Oh boy. English isn't my strong suit at all. Mr. Nash held his head in his hands as Emily lowered her gaze, still pale. I do have the Japanese documents, but they said the overseas division would be there today. Apparently, this project with Goodness was an international collaboration. Emily mentioned $10 million earlier, which would make this Taro Corporation's first international deal. Naturally, we didn't want to risk such a significant project failing. Yeah. I just don't think I can explain all this contract information fluently in English. Mr. Nash glanced at the Japanese version of the contract. Interpreting all this complex information on the spot, only someone fluent in English could pull it off. Fluent in English? Wait, hold on. Suddenly, Mr. Nash looked as if he had an idea and lifted his head. Mr. Nash? Emily glanced at him, tilting her head in confusion. Emily. We have someone fluent in English right here. I meet Mr. Nash's gaze. He looks directly at me and speaks. Sean, I need you to do this. What? Wait, what are you talking about? In my shock, I momentarily forgot that I was Mr. Nash driver. Come on. You can handle this, right? Mr. Nash clasped his hands in front of him, practically bowing as if asking to borrow some class notes. You can't just spring this on me. Why me, anyway? I shook my head in disbelief, but Mr. Nash leaned toward me in the driver's seat, practically pleading. This is the company's future on the line. It's a $10 million deal. His eyes were serious. But I couldn't just agree that easily. After all, I was just the driver now. Don't put a $10 million deal on the shoulders of the driver. You know I've been out of practice. Mr. Nash was right. I used to be good at English. But that was back in my student days, and I hadn't used it since starting this job. I know, but you can do it. You were part of all those debates in supervision, right? Supervision, that was ages ago. Hearing that word brought back old memories, and I felt myself starting to drift back to my college days. I couldn't fall for it, this was exactly what Mr. Nash wanted. Wait a minute, what's going on here? Emily, who had been left out of the loop, looked between us, wide-eyed. Just then, her phone rang. Oh, it's the office. Excuse me, I need to take this. While Emily took the call, Mr. Nash and I continued our whispered back and forth, me saying no way, and him pleading, please. Wait, hold on. Suddenly, Emily raised her voice, and both Mr. Nash and I turned to look at her. Noticing something unusual, Mr. Nash whispered to Emily, put it on speaker. While continuing the conversation, Emily switched the phone to speaker mode. I'm sure I put it in my bag. I even double-checked. I didn't leave it on my desk. Oh, well, I just happened to notice some important looking papers on your desk and thought I'd give you a call. You sure you won't be needing them today? The voice on the line was indeed Stephen's. Yes, but we just talked about handling important documents, didn't we? Although, I'm sure it's all too late by now. It was as if he had waited until he was sure we wouldn't make it in time to call. Even over the phone, I could practically see the smug look on his face. That's. Emily glanced at me, her words faltering. What was I supposed to do here? What do you intend to do about this colossal mistake? Huh? Did you think you could still stay on as the president's secretary after this? Stephen's tone was sharp and cutting. I swear, I put it in my bag. Enough already. It wasn't in there, was it? If it were, you wouldn't be in this mess right now. Emily flinched at his harsh tone. Was she used to being reprimanded like this all the time? You're finished. Acting all high and mighty just because you're the president's secretary, and as a newbie, no less. Aren't you embarrassed, carrying around a childish bag like that as an adult? Emily was startled, then reached for a small pouch scattered on the back seat. The contents of her bag were still strewn around from when she'd been searching for the document. She gripped it tightly, trying to hide it from Mr. Nash and me. It looked well worn, as if she'd had it for years. So, immature tastes lead to immature work, huh? We don't need someone who makes these kinds of mistakes in the executive assistant team. Stephen's mocking laughter echoed through the phone. The cruel remarks made me want to cover my ears. But then it hit me. How did Stephen know what was inside Emily's bag? Judging by Emily's reaction, I wondered if this pouch was something she usually kept hidden away, tucked safely in her bag. It confirmed my suspicion that Stephen was involved in the document's disappearance. I was now certain of it. He must have taken the file when Emily left her desk momentarily for Mr. Nash. A small pouch like this wouldn't have been visible unless someone peeked inside her bag. Emily remained silent, looking down with a face that seemed on the verge of tears. She didn't just look discouraged from having her mistake pointed out, and it was the kind of sadness you see when something precious has been belittled. I couldn't stand the thought of seeing her look so defeated any longer. If I wanted to stop Stephen's tirade, there was only one way. Forget the document. I'll accompany you to the meeting and handle the English. Just moments before, I wouldn't have believed I'd say something like that. Emily looked up, startled, while Mr. Nash pumped his fist in a triumphant yes. Thank you, Sean. Here's the Japanese version of the document. As Mr. Nash handed me the file, I gave him a hesitant look and quickly skimmed through it. But there was no time. With only minutes left, I'd have to translate it on the spot during the meeting. I told you I'm rusty, and now I have to translate something this complicated. I let out my frustration, but Mr. Nash didn't seem fazed in the slightest. Then Emily suddenly exclaimed, "Oh!" I was so startled that I accidentally hung up the call. I couldn't help but wonder what Stephen's face must have looked like when he realized the call had ended without warning. He had no idea who'd spoken up in my place. I felt a pang of doubt. Could I really pull this off for Emily's sake? The only real experience I had was from my student days, and it had been years since I'd used English regularly, even though I had some work experience with it back then. But I couldn't just leave Emily to deal with Stephen's petty schemes alone. It reminded me too much of myself back then. I, too, had once believed that I had to handle everything on my own, without relying on anyone. In the end, I'd failed. I didn't want Emily to make the same mistake. As I was desperately recalling all the English I could muster while staring at the documents, Mr. Nash cut through my thoughts. It's time, Sean. He stepped out of the car confidently and strode into Goodness headquarters. He greeted the receptionist with an easy familiarity, making small talk as he led the way. Watching him walk ahead, I felt a strange sense of nostalgia. His back seemed to say, "I don't doubt for a second that you'll do this." Ever since I'd known him, Mr. Nash had always placed his trust in others so easily. And somehow, that trust made me feel like I could do it, too. I'd always thought he was suited to be a leader, even back in the day. And here he was, actually becoming a president. How many years has it been since then? Tyler Nash and I first met back in high school, before he became president. We were attending a well-known college preparatory school in the area, and we became friends after being seated near each other in class. Tyler was tall and lean, with a laid-back attitude and an easy charm that made him popular with the girls. Meanwhile, I was a smart student but not particularly social at the time, so people often asked him, "Why are you friends with Sean?" Each time, he'd reply, "Sean's amazing," or "Sean has a unique perspective," and always spoke well of me. At first, I thought he was just teasing, but he genuinely seemed to believe it. He'd even listened earnestly to my then ridiculous dreams without a hint of judgment. There was a famous economist who was well known for America's New Deal, John Maynard Keynes. Reading his works had sparked my interest in economics, and I started dreaming of studying at Cambridge, where Keynes himself had gone. I've always liked studying, and my grades were good. However, deciding to seriously apply to Cambridge University was a whole different story. There were excellent schools in Japan to study economics, so some might think it wasn't necessary to go all the way to England. And even if I made it into Cambridge after all that effort, I didn't have any clear plans for what I'd do afterward. My only motivation was wanting to study in the same environment as Keynes. I had spent a year in a British boarding school during middle school, so I had no trouble with everyday English. But competing with the world's best students? That would require real resolve. With nothing but this trendy motivation, I didn't think I'd get very far. When I told Tyler about it, though, his eyes lit up as he said, "That's awesome." Annoyed, I snapped, "Don't just say that offhand," but he repeated himself. "You should go for it. Easy for you to say. You can do it." He looked at me with an unwavering gaze. Even as the top student in my class, I knew Cambridge wasn't going to be easy. It's the kind of highly competitive university where, even if I threw everything aside to focus on studying, I'd still have a higher chance of failing. By the way, what was your ranking on the last test? I think I was about 30th from the bottom. Tyler was one of those naturally quick thinkers who could do well if he studied, but I'd never seen him put in real effort. He liked to coast along, as he put it, staying comfortably at the lower ranks. If you told me you wanted to aim for the Tokyo University because of your hero Kurt Thompson, I'd probably stop you. Who's Kurt Thompson? That's not the point. He laughed, then gave me a serious look again. I'd support you, though. His direct gaze startled me, and I found myself looking away. Are you crazy, aiming for Cambridge? Why would you go abroad? What are you trying to prove? Not only did he not mock my ambitions like that, but he even said, "I'll support you." I was so moved by his words that I felt embarrassed and couldn't look up. Hey, are you blushing? Shut up. I stood up abruptly and dashed out of the classroom. My heart was pounding, and I felt like I could do anything. Maybe it sounds foolish, but Tyler's encouragement gave me the motivation to start preparing for Cambridge. With me studying hard by his side, he suddenly decided, "All right, I'll aim for Tokyo University then," and to my amazement, he got in. I remember feeling a bit intimidated by his potential. I also managed to pass the Cambridge entrance exam, and since no one from our school had ever been admitted, the entire school was in an uproar. It's often said that graduating from a university overseas is harder than getting accepted, and that certainly felt true. I thought I had studied the hardest during entrance exam preparation, but once I entered university, the challenges were far greater. But that's Cambridge University, known as one of the highest-ranking institutions internationally. Students come from all over the world, bringing diverse perspectives and ideas. In addition to regular lectures, Cambridge offers supervision, small group sessions of 1 to 3 students. These sessions focus on deeply exploring specialized topics, and preparing for them was no easy task. Just keeping up with the daily classes was a struggle, and letting my guard down even a little meant I'd fall behind. I spent countless days buried in the historic library, absorbed in books, a tough but incredibly stimulating experience. I attended the same university as Keynes and studied economics. At first, that alone was enough for me, but as I talked about future dreams with others studying economics, I began to get a clearer picture of what I wanted to do. While some aimed to work in consulting or start businesses abroad, I felt a strong desire to apply what I learned here back in Japan. I thought that working as a government official in a central ministry might be a way to contribute to Japanese society. With that goal, I graduated from Cambridge University, aiming for a career in the civil service. But from this point on, my life took an unexpected turn. For the first few years after joining the ministry, I was so busy that I barely have any memory of that time. In the bureaucracy, there's a career rotation system where you're transferred every 2 to 3 years. I transferred about 3 times, and although the workload was relentless, I managed to avoid conflicts within each department. However, unlike my student days, when effort could overcome most challenges, I soon realized that relationships between people aren't something that can be solved through hard work alone. In my new department, I began struggling with my interactions with a senior official. Even in the ministry, the hierarchy between bosses and subordinates, as well as seniors and juniors, is much like that of a typical company. Each department had many capable senior officials, but there was one person I just couldn't get along with. While I could take constructive criticism, this person frequently interfered with my personal life. He mocked my personality and mannerisms as if they were something to laugh at. At first, I tried to go along without causing trouble, but the continuous pressure of long hours and unrelenting work began to wear me down mentally and physically. His words were like small, constant pricks to my heart. If it had been only once, I could have brushed it off, but the accumulation over time became painful. As I endured, the wounds grew deeper, and the pain became unbearable. Working in the central ministry, being at the heart of the government, was as busy as one would expect. During parliamentary sessions, every ministry is overwhelmed. My department was no exception, and late nights became the norm. One day, I collapsed during work. My mind and body had reached their limit. And that was the end of my career. It was my 10th year in the ministry. After 10 years of relentless work and mental anguish, I had finally reached a point where I couldn't continue. In hindsight, it was my first experience of failure in life. Fortunately, after a short rest, my physical health improved significantly, but healing my mind was a much harder task. Studying had always been manageable, and I had friends who understood me. I used to think I could push through anything if I tried hard enough, but this experience made me realize there are limits. As I sat in the hospital, gazing out the window, wondering what to do next after quitting my job, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my friend Tyler. We had stayed in touch over the years, reaching out about once a year since high school. Recently, we'd both been too busy to meet, but reading his familiar, quirky writing from high school warmed my heart. I'm in the hospital now. Collapsed. Watch yourself. When I replied honestly about my situation, Tyler, usually so nonchalant, rushed over to the hospital, visibly concerned. Upon seeing me, he looked relieved and said, "Hey, you look fine." As we enjoyed the reunion, I shared the story of my resignation and the heavy thoughts I was carrying. Tyler listened intently. I've always liked having a goal to work toward, but now, I have nothing. It felt as if there was a hole in my heart, draining away all my motivation and energy. I had never experienced anything like it before. Then maybe you don't need to do anything right now. Tyler said this in his usual laid-back way. That might be true, but I can't just keep doing nothing forever. I sighed, and Tyler suddenly looked as if he'd had an idea. So, how about being a driver? I just happened to be looking for one. A driver? Like for a taxi? No, my own personal driver. I realized I hadn't asked him about his recent life, and it turned out Tyler had become a president. He always seemed suited for leadership, But to think that the same guy who was near the bottom in high school tests had become the head of a company with many employees was surprising, to say the least. And so, I became Mr. Nash's driver. When we entered the conference room, the employees from Goodness were already gathered. Mr. Nash greeted the person who seemed to be the head of their international division in English. I thought to myself, so, he can speak English after all, as I introduced myself and the meeting began. Since I'd only had a brief moment to glance over the documents, I translated on the fly, pushing my mind to its limits. There were some rough spots, but my English seemed to get the message across, and the negotiation progressed smoothly, ending with a contract. We secured a $10 million deal. Emily watched the entire exchange, mouth agape, listening to my English. Sean. That was amazing. When we returned to the car, Emily, still excited, spoke to me as I settled into the driver's seat. Oh, thanks. I'm just glad it worked out. Phew, that was a relief. As I translated my hardest in the meeting, Mr. Nash had just sat back, seemingly calm, which had me wondering if he'd ever felt nervous at all. The confidence was almost irritating. He trusts me a bit too much. I'm heading back to the office, but next time, it's your turn. When I hinted about Emily and Stephen, Mr. Nash nodded and said, I know. Handling things like this is part of my job. I was planning to handle things with Stephen on my own. It's my responsibility that things escalated this way. I'm very sorry. Emily bowed deeply toward Mr. Nash and me. Emily. I know Sean advised me not to carry this all alone. Watching Emily, I saw a bit of my past self. If you keep holding it in, there's only so much you can bear before hitting your limit. You have to act before it comes to that. I hadn't been able to lean on anyone, but I didn't want Emily to end up like me. Don't worry. Thanks to Sean, it didn't turn into the worst-case scenario, right? Tyler said proudly as if it were his achievement. Well, you did help me pick my college back then. Mr. Nash didn't miss the words I muttered under my breath. Ha? Thanks to me? Did I do something? Shut up. It's nothing. Too embarrassed to explain further, I turned back to the driver's seat. Come on, tell me. Emily, unable to contain herself, burst into laughter at Mr. Nash's clueless tone. Her bright laughter filled the car. When Mr. Nash summoned Stephen, he hadn't realized that his exchanges with Emily had reached Mr. Nash's ears, and he practically fell to the ground in shock. I'm so sorry. Stephen bowed so low his head almost hit the floor. Even though it didn't go all the way, as a company, we couldn't ignore the potential damage Stephen had attempted to cause. Instead of apologizing to me, there's someone else you need to apologize to first. When Stephen timidly lifted his head, he found Emily standing right in front of him. Mr. Nash, I've already. Having to admit defeat to someone he's looked down on for being a newcomer and lacking experience. It's hard to imagine a greater humiliation for Stephen. I'm sorry. Just as he stammered out the words, his shoulders shaking, Mr. Nash spoke firmly, I can't hear you. I am very sorry. Seeing the usually calm Mr. Nash raise his voice, Stephen seemed too stunned to even be confused. Emily told me excitedly that she'd never seen Mr. Nash like that before. As for Emily's pouch, the very thing that had led to her catching on to Stephen's schemes, she later explained that to me herself. Surprisingly, Emily was known for forgetting things a lot as a child. Her mother had given her that well-worn pouch as a charm, saying, "Keep this with you to help you remember." Ever since then, Emily somehow stopped forgetting things. Now, even though it's mostly for luck, she feels a bit uneasy without it. It's so worn out now that I wouldn't want anyone to see it. It's just a charm, Emily said, holding it tightly with a hint of embarrassment yet with clear affection. As for Stephen, he was transferred to a different department after years of dominating the secretary division. His new role had nothing in common with the secretarial duties, so he's struggling, not knowing where to start. Now he's being taught by younger employees and even talked about behind his back as useless. The other day, I spotted him eating lunch alone in the cafeteria, looking rather forlorn. My days felt like a long vacation. Though outwardly, I was Mr. Nash's driver, all I'd been doing was giving a friend a lift. It's not that I thought driving was easy, but stepping into a completely different line of work gave me a fresh perspective and sparked a desire to take on something new. I'll need to find a new driver, Mr. Nash said as I opened the back door. Today was my last day giving him a lift. You'll find someone in no time. So, have you decided what you're doing next? Yeah. An old friend from my time in England reached out recently. Strangely enough, a friend from college contacted me after years. He offered me a chance to work together on a project. A year ago, I probably would have turned it down without a second thought. But I'm sure that successfully closing that high-stakes deal the other day played a role in shifting my mindset. Being in that intense atmosphere felt like it unlocked something within me. So, you're going back to England? Yeah, I think it'll be good to visit after all this time. It's a startup, so it looks promising. I can look forward now. It's thanks to Mr. Nash, who reached out when I was at my lowest. I don't quite know how to thank him, and it's a bit embarrassing to say too much. You're excited, aren't you? Well, yeah. When you're like this, things usually turn out fine. Mr. Nash said that and laughed. What's that supposed to mean? You've got this. It was exactly what I needed to hear. The words that would keep me going more than any others. With those words, I felt like I could face any challenges that lay ahead. Thanks. As I turned around and spoke softly, Mr. Nash didn't miss a word. What was that? Annoyed by his teasing grin, I gave him a hard pat on the back to cover my embarrassment. Well, I'm short-staffed over there. Mind if I recruit Emily? Absolutely not. Today marked the end of our relationship as driver and boss. But our bond would remain unchanged from here on. Imagining the bright futures that awaited us, we set out on our own paths. What is this supposed to mean? I was at a loss for words as I stared at the nameplate. Today was my precious sister's wedding day. The nameplate placed in front of me had the unbelievable words "Middle School Graduate Dummy" engraved on it. We're simply giving an honest evaluation. Something inside me was about to snap. At that moment, Emily spoke softly. Shall we crush them? I heard her words and slowly nodded. Yeah. My name is John Smith. I turned 35 this year. Sometimes, I'm surprised when I think about my age. Has it really been that long? Looking back over my 35 years, there's been a lot that's happened. There were good times, of course, but also bad ones. But what I remember most vividly is when I was 16. I still clearly recall that day when our world changed in an instant. I was studying with some friends at the local library. When I got home a little after 4 p.m., the house was eerily quiet. The moment I opened the front door, the usual warmth was gone, and the house was shrouded in silence and darkness. I expected my parents to greet me with their usual hi, but that day was different. As the unease grew, I realized there were no calls from Dad either. Normally, if something were wrong, he'd call immediately. But this time, nothing. My little sister, Kate, had just returned from her team activities, and we waited together for our parents to come home. Then, the news on TV caught our attention. The screen showed footage from an accident site, and the camera zoomed in on the scene. That day, our parents had been involved in a collision with a large truck on the highway. At the hospital, I was met with the painful sight of my injured parents. They were hospitalized and fought hard, continuing their treatment. However, their lives didn't last much longer. Even as I faced the reality of their absence, I still couldn't grasp it. The overwhelming feeling of disbelief was all I could focus on. Afterward, the truck driver, who miraculously survived, continued to deny his fault. We barely received any compensation and were forced into a life of hardship. In that moment, my world changed completely. With my family gone, there was only one thing left for me to protect. It was my sister, Kate. Kate was 6 years younger than me. She had just started 4th grade. After our parents passed away, I suddenly found myself supporting the household and doing all the chores. I was still a 16-year-old kid myself, but I knew I couldn't be a kid anymore. I felt crushed under the weight of responsibility, knowing I had to ensure Kate didn't live a life of hardship. I dropped out of high school and immediately started working. There was no money for school, and above all, I had to support my sister, so I had no choice but to work. I started working at a mid-sized electronics company called Martin Electronics. Martin Electronics was a local company that specialized in design and manufacturing. The work was tough, but I had no choice, so I had to keep us going. I had no time to even think about running away. From that day on, I entered a life where weekends didn't exist. Even so, deep inside, I couldn't help but wonder, why am I the one who has to do all this? Do I have to give up on my own life? Even so, as long as Kate was there, I didn't give up. One day, when she came home from school, she looked a bit down. Kate was in her basketball team at school and absolutely loved basketball. But since our parents passed away, she must have been carrying something heavy inside her as well. When she was about to enter middle school, she had been determined to join the basketball team. "John, I've decided not to join the basketball team." I was surprised when I saw the look on Kate's face as she said that. I knew how much she loved basketball. No matter how tough things got, she always smiled when she was playing basketball. "Why?" I asked, swallowing my words. "Because, seeing you work so hard, I can't help but think, what's the point of me continuing basketball if there's no future for us?" When she said that, I wanted to scream inside. Why was she blaming herself so much? I would never allow her to give up on her dream. That's what I thought. "Kate, don't even think about quitting playing basketball. You still have a future ahead of you. I'll figure it out, so you keep playing. Chase your dream." Luckily, basketball doesn't cost as much as sports like baseball, just the ball and a uniform. I can handle that. So don't worry about anything and keep going. Kate nodded silently, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, John." I worked tirelessly to support her. I couldn't let her quit playing basketball, and at the very least, I wanted to make sure she finished middle and high school. That was my one and only mission. But when Kate was in her 3rd year of middle school, her heart wavered again. I was determined to get her through high school, but one day, she said something shocking. "John, I think I want to start working. I don't even like studying, and going to school just feels pointless." Her words stunned me. Kate had always been a bright student. She balanced both academics and basketball perfectly, but now, she was struggling with the reality in front of her. "You've always been so good at playing basketball and studying. There are so many possibilities ahead of you. You don't have to rush into working now." I desperately tried to convince her. I knew that if she didn't stay in school, her future would close off. "But, if I don't work, how are we going to make ends meet?" Her big eyes filled with tears. Even then, I kept encouraging her. "That's exactly why I want you to study hard and see more of the world. Are you sure it's okay?" "Of course. You can do it, no doubt." After that, Kate decided to go to high school. I felt a wave of relief and continued to support her. As time passed, Kate successfully graduated high school and went on to college with the help of a scholarship. She majored in law, worked tirelessly towards her goal, and eventually passed the bar exam. When I got the news of her success, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Back then, all I could do was support her, but now she was confidently forging her own path. "John, I got a job. I'm officially a lawyer." When I heard those words over the phone, I was speechless. The pride I felt for my one and only sister was indescribable. The little girl Kate used to be is now 29 years old. Just the other day, she told me something exciting. I've met someone really special. The special person Kate had met was Kyle Turner. Kyle was a client at the law firm where Kate worked and the son of Miles Turner, a high-ranking government official. Kate started talking excitedly about meeting Kyle. He's really an amazing person. He's serious about his work, but he's also incredibly kind. He listens to me and always encourages me. Her eyes sparkled as she spoke, and I could see the trust she had in him from her expression. In that moment, a small wave of concern crossed my mind. Was Kyle really the right person for Kate? Would he truly cherish her? I couldn't help but worry. However, Kate had no doubt in her voice. She seemed fully confident in her decision. John, I've decided. I'm going to marry Kyle. I was momentarily surprised when I heard that. But Kate's resolve was firm. Her eyes were filled with determination, and I could tell she was genuinely happy. If you're truly happy, I won't say anything. Just make sure he knows to take good care of you. Kate smiled brightly at my words. As the wedding plans moved forward, it became clear that Kate was falling more and more in love with Kyle. The two of them occasionally shared stories about their relationship with me. Kyle was a highly respected bureaucrat, known for his charisma and kind heart. And he often spoke about wanting to contribute to society together with Kate. Still, deep down, I often wondered how our parents would have reacted if they were still alive. If it weren't for that accident, maybe they'd be here to share in this happiness. The thought of that tightened my chest. About 6 months before the wedding, I was supposed to meet Kyle's parents for the first time as Kate's family member. Kate and Kyle were escorted by the staff for a meeting at the wedding venue. During that time, I was left to meet with his parents. In a corner of the hotel lounge, his father Miles and mother Megan were already seated. They came from a distinguished family of high-ranking officials. Feeling a bit nervous, I walked over to them. "Welcome, John." Miles greeted me calmly. However, his expression remained composed, with a sense of distance in it. He was in his early 50s, tall, and had a handsome, distinguished appearance. Dressed in a crisp and elegant suit, he exuded an air of refinement. Seated next to him was Megan. Though past her 50s, she still carried a graceful, sophisticated presence. But there was a cold gleam in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. "Thank you for having me." I bowed slightly and took my seat. For a brief moment, there was silence. Though we exchanged polite greetings, the tension in the air was palpable. After a while, Megan spoke quietly. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, John." She smiled, but I sensed something probing behind that smile. "Thank you," I replied politely, though a hint of unease crept into my heart. Miles then spoke up. "Since this is our first time meeting, we'd like to ask you a few things." He looked directly at me as he continued. "Kyle is the pride of our family. He's an exceptional bureaucrat and is striving for an even higher position in the future. Now that Kate has decided to marry him, we're very pleased as well." I felt a small sense of relief at his words. But then, his gaze sharpened as it focused back on me, and he continued. "John, there's something I'd like to ask you first." His piercing eyes locked onto mine. "May I ask about your background?" I took a small breath. My background. Yes, after all, being the brother of such a brilliant lawyer like Kate, I'm sure you have an impressive background as well, don't you? Exactly. We'd love to hear what you've done and what achievements you've made. Miles continued with a tone of genuine interest. Choosing my words carefully, I began to speak calmly. I lost my parents when I was 16. After that, I started working right away to support the household. I dropped out of high school. But I've been working ever since to protect my family. Miles's expression stiffened for a brief moment. "So, you're saying you only graduated from middle school?" Megan asked coldly. "That's right," I answered quietly. The moment I responded, Megan's expression changed, and she spoke with a firm tone. A middle school graduate. Her voice dripped with disdain. With such a background, you have no right to associate with people from our family. Miles nodded silently in agreement. I'm really concerned this could affect Kyle and Kate's future. I felt a surge of anger rising inside me, but I tried to remain calm. But I've always been there to protect my sister. Are you sure you don't mean Kate has protected you? What? Megan sneered as she spoke. Protect her? You? A middle school graduate? After a brief silence, I replied firmly. Of course, Kate earned her accomplishments on her own. But I chose to drop out of high school to help her. No matter what anyone says, I don't regret that decision. Megan couldn't hide her irritation at my response. She exhaled deeply, her cold eyes fixed on me. If you intend to keep seeing Kyle and Kate, her voice grew lower and colder. We won't allow you near her. I was speechless. Her words froze the room. There was a clear intention of rejection behind her statement. I felt my anger boiling inside but maintained my composure as I answered. That won't be possible. Kate is my family. Ever since our parents died, we've supported each other to get through life. So, I see no reason why I shouldn't continue to see her. Family? Is that what you're calling it? Megan sneered again. I don't care how hard you've worked for your sister. That doesn't mean we have to accept it. Miles spoke up as well. Calm down, Megan. John, it's not that we distrust you. We just want Kate to have the right environment, suitable for someone in our family. Are you saying I'm not good enough for Kate? I raised my voice slightly, but at that moment, Miles stepped forward and spoke in a low voice. Yes. Your background is a significant problem for us. My background? I frowned. Yes. Miles replied coldly. In our family, education and social status are important. Someone who lacks those qualities cannot be part of our family. Those words tightened around my chest. The fear that had been lingering inside me for so long had now materialized and stood firmly in front of me. But even then, I had no intention of backing down. Still, I will continue seeing my sister. There's nothing wrong with remaining in her life as her only family. How many times do I have to say it? Don't ever show your face in front of us again. Megan's words were sharp and forceful. At that moment, something snapped inside me. Words were no longer enough. I realized that I could never make them understand why I had been protecting Kate all these years. Miles, who had remained silent, finally spoke. If you insist on continuing to see Kyle and Kate, we'll ask Kate to pursue legal action. You do understand that we have the power to make that happen, don't you? Oomph. There's no way a middle school graduate could understand that. Both Miles and Megan looked at me with cold, disdainful eyes. But my resolve was stronger than their contempt. No matter what obstacles were in my way, I had a past where I had protected Kate and lived with her through everything. Miles spoke again. Prepare yourself to cut all ties with our family. His icy words weighed heavily on me. I will never stop seeing my sister. I said it with determination. There was a moment of silence. I tried to break the uncomfortable tension by speaking, but no words came out. I knew that no matter what I said, I couldn't change their minds. Just then, Kate and Kyle returned from their meeting. Kate, looking a bit tired, smiled softly at me. But the moment she saw my face, her smile faded, and she looked at me with concern. John, are you okay? I nodded slightly and said to Kate, I'm fine. Don't worry. Kate and Kyle sat beside me and exchanged small talk with his parents, but the atmosphere remained tense. Megan continued to ignore me throughout, and Miles barely spoke a word to me. Our first meeting had ended in complete discord. From that day forward, I had a sense that my relationship with Kyle's parents would only become more strained. However, I wouldn't change my stance. I was determined to protect my bond with Kate and face any challenge to ensure her happiness. 6 months passed, and my relationship with the Turner family had almost completely broken down. Neither I nor Kyle's parents had made any contact since that day. I kept in touch with Kate occasionally, talking about the wedding preparations. But I avoided asking too much to keep her out of the conflict with her in-laws. During this time, I told my wife, Emily, about everything that had happened. Emily, 4 years younger than me, was strong-willed and outspoken. She didn't hide her anger when it came to the insults from Kyle's parents. I can't believe they said that, just to protect their own status. I'll make sure they get what's coming to them someday. Emily would say things like that, but I tried my best to keep things from escalating. The last thing I wanted was for any problems to arise at Kate's big day, her wedding. Finally, the wedding day arrived. The ceremony was held at a luxurious hotel, with hundreds of guests attending. I went to the venue with Emily, and we waited in the dressing room until the ceremony began. Today is your sister's special day, so you're going to keep calm even if those two try something, right? Emily looked at me as she asked. Of course. For Kate's sake, I won't make a big deal out of anything, no matter what happens. I answered, trying to calm myself. But as we were shown to our seats in the venue, something unexpected happened. The nameplate on my seat had the unbelievable words "Middle School Graduate Dummy" engraved on it. What is this supposed to mean? I was speechless as I stared at the nameplate. Emily, too, saw it and her face immediately darkened with anger. Is this some kind of joke? I called over the staff and asked for an explanation, but they only looked confused. I'm terribly sorry, but this nameplate was made at the request of the groom's family. Hearing that, the anger I had been holding back flared up. This was definitely the work of Kyle's parents. Excuse me, but what exactly is the meaning of this? I spoke quietly but firmly, trying to avoid drawing too much attention. At that moment, Miles appeared in front of me. With a cold smile, he shrugged slightly. Oh, I'm not sure what you mean. We simply gave an honest assessment. His words nearly made me snap. But this was a wedding. I couldn't ruin Kate's special day. Do you understand what that name means? I struggled to stay calm, while Miles maintained his indifferent attitude, laughing dismissively. Of course. But someone with no education or culture like you doesn't really need a proper nameplate, does he? That's going too far. Emily snapped at him, but I held her back. I had to endure this. No matter what we said, causing a scene here would only hurt Kate. I had no choice but to bear it. The wedding ceremony began and proceeded without incident. However, the tense atmosphere lingered. I was scheduled to give a speech as part of the bride's family. I had spent days preparing and memorizing the speech. But as the groom's side finished their speeches, my name was never called. Feeling uneasy, I went to ask the staff. Their response shocked me. We were informed by the groom's family that, due to circumstances, the speech has been cancelled. What? For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what was happening, but I quickly realized the truth. This was yet another scheme by Kyle's parents, designed to humiliate me. They must have cancelled my speech to embarrass me further. I can't take this anymore. I instructed the staff to call Miles and Megan to the lobby. As I waited in the lobby, Kyle's parents slowly appeared. Both of them wore smug, triumphant expressions. I heard my speech was cancelled. Care to explain why? I demanded, and Megan responded with a cold smile. We can't possibly let someone like you, a middle school graduate, give a speech in front of everyone. It would disgrace our family. Her words caused all the anger I had been suppressing to explode. All the insults, the dismissiveness, and the harassment during the wedding, it was too much. There was no reason left to hold back. Just then, Emily appeared behind me and gently tapped my arm. John, What are we going to do? Emily asked calmly, though the anger in her eyes was unmistakable. I took a deep breath and looked straight at Kyle's parents. You clearly have no idea what I've accomplished, I said firmly. Miles snorted in disdain. And what's that supposed to mean? Do you think someone like you could have any impact on us? At that moment, Emily spoke quietly. Shall we crush them, Mr. Smith, the CEO? Hearing her words, I nodded slowly. Yeah, let's crush them. For a brief moment, both Miles and Megan looked shocked, but they quickly regained their sneering expressions. You? A CEO? Come on, no matter what you try, it won't affect us. Go ahead, tell us you're ending some deal or something. Miles scoffed as he spoke. Deals? Well, as it happens, the company manufacturing the digital systems for Miles's government-led digitization project is mine. He was shocked. Their faces immediately changed at my words. What are you saying? Miles frowned. The project that you're so proud of, the digital transformation you're pushing, it's my company that's behind it. And I've just decided to cancel the contract today. At those words, their faces froze completely. No way. You're the CEO of Martin Electronics? But I thought Kelvin Martin was the CEO. That's right. Emily cut him off. Could you explain, as my lead secretary, Emily? Mr. Martin retired last year. And John was appointed as CEO, based on his years of experience and his pivotal role in developing cutting-edge AI-based digital systems. He was highly recommended by the former CEO, Mr. Martin. I believe you boasted about being close to him in the media, but you didn't know about it. Did you? This can't be true. It's a joke, right? Megan said, her face pale. If you think it's a joke, go ahead and check our company's website on your phone. Emily said calmly. Megan pulled out her phone and looked at the website, where my picture and greeting as CEO were displayed. John, you're not serious about canceling the deal, are you? If this project doesn't move forward, we're finished. We're family. So you wouldn't do something that cold, right? I shook my head calmly. No, I'm serious. If you keep disrespecting me, I'll take the necessary steps, and that means canceling the deal. Megan's voice trembled, and she could no longer hide her panic. The project Miles was leading was crucial for the Turner family's reputation. If it collapsed, their social standing would be severely impacted, and I knew that well. Wait. That can't happen. If the project stalls, we'll lose everything. Megan raised her voice in desperation. I'm fully aware of how important this project is for your family. Yet you've refused to acknowledge my role in it and have continued to insult me. You should regret that. I continued, my voice steady but firm. Miles, momentarily speechless, quickly grew agitated and shouted. Don't think you can stop the deal that easily. You know how much power we have. Emily smiled coldly and responded. You'll soon find out how much your power really counts. Besides, maybe we should have rethought everything from the beginning. The days of looking down on people based on their education or status are long over. Both of their faces turned pale in an instant. For the first time, they were being forced to confront the reality that everything they had built could crumble. I watched them calmly and continued. This is Kate's wedding, her special day. I've held my tongue and endured for her sake, but there's a limit to how much I can take. My speech was cancelled, my name was insulted. What more do you plan to do? Miles looked like he was about to retort, but Megan stopped him. She looked at us with fear in her eyes and spoke in a trembling voice. John, isn't that going a bit too far? We admit we might have gone too far with some of the things we said. So, please, can we just forget about this? Don't think an apology is enough to make this right. I dismissed Megan's words coldly. What you've done to me isn't something that can be brushed aside with a simple apology. Besides, it's too late for that. My decision stands. So the deal is over. Wait. John, that's too harsh. Miles raised his voice again, but I wasn't backing down. Just then, Emily took a quiet breath and offered a suggestion. There is one possible way. If you publicly apologize for all the insults we've received, we might reconsider. Publicly. Megan's face showed confusion. Yes. You will have to stand in front of everyone and admit to the insults you've thrown at us and apologize sincerely. If you can do that, we'll think about reopening the deal. There's no way we can do that. Miles erupted angrily. Emily remained calm as she continued. Then, there's nothing more to discuss. Whatever happens next will be a result of your own choices. Miles and Megan couldn't say another word. As we turned to leave, they stood frozen in place, visibly trembling. The wedding proceeded smoothly afterward. I felt bad for Kate, but luckily, she didn't seem to notice any of the tension. At the end of the reception, I gave my heartfelt congratulations to Kate and Kyle, sincerely wishing them happiness. I wanted to believe that my actions, putting Kate's happiness first, had been the right choice. After the wedding, Miles and Megan reached out multiple times to apologize, but we ignored every attempt. We had no intention of reopening negotiations until they genuinely reflected on their behavior and apologized without burdening Kate. Weeks passed, and within us was a quiet determination. Then, a few weeks later, Miles and Megan publicly apologized for the insults they had hurled at us. They held a press conference, admitting their wrongdoing, including the events at the wedding. The media coverage of the apology delivered a devastating blow to the Turner family's reputation. The Turner family's name has really hit rock bottom, hasn't it? Yeah, it sure has. After witnessing their public apology, we finally moved forward with discussions to resume the deal. Though our relationship with Kyle's parents remained cold, they kept their promise and never insulted us again. Well, I guess that settles everything, Emily said with a smile. Yeah, but in the end, they had no choice but to change. If we hadn't stood up to them, they'd still be the same. I exhaled deeply, feeling a small sense of relief. But this was for the best. I'm proud of how strong you've been. As Emily smiled at me, I felt a deep sense of gratitude that she had always been by my side. A few months later, Miles's downfall sent shockwaves through the entire Turner family. With his project collapsing, Miles's credibility crumbled, and his subordinates began abandoning him one by one. Miles and Megan were forced to watch as everything they had built fell apart in an instant, unable to hide their panic and regret. Kyle and Kate also reached a point where they had to reconsider their relationship with the Turner family. Though Kyle had desperately tried to live up to his parents' expectations, he realized that their behavior was causing them both pain. He finally decided to cut ties. Kate, our life is ours. We can't let my parents control us anymore. Kate agreed with his decision, and together they severed ties with the Turner family. Miles and Megan were shocked and opposed their decision, but Kyle's resolve was unshakable. Kyle and Kate decided to build their new life together, leaving the Turner family behind. Kate continued to deepen her career as a lawyer, dedicating herself to family law and supporting children who had lost their parents in accidents. Through her experiences, she shared her thoughts with me. John, I want to help children like us who lost their parents. I want to create an organization that can provide them with a safe place to live. Her words moved me deeply, and I immediately offered my full support. That's a great idea. I'll help out too. Thank you. Kyle said he'd help as well. Can I count on you if we need any advice? Of course. Whether it's funding or anything else, I'll support you however I can. Martin Electronics had experienced significant growth in recent years, thanks to its AI-driven digitalization efforts. It was no longer a small local business but a renowned major company. With my company providing financial support, Kate's organization was sure to get off the ground quickly. Together, Kate and Kyle began working toward establishing the support organization. The organization focused on helping children who had lost their parents due to accidents or family issues, and its efforts gradually expanded. My company became one of its sponsors, and soon, the organization achieved great success. One day, Kate excitedly shared some good news with a smile. John, one of the kids we've been supporting, was successfully adopted by a new family. I was genuinely happy to hear that and felt proud of her growth. You're really amazing. Let's keep working together and keep this going. Through this, Kate and I strengthened our bond as siblings and moved forward together toward a brighter future. By severing ties with the Turner family, we were able to take a new step and build our lives on our own terms. Hey! I need to talk to you about something important. Come here for a minute. I was called by the second-generation president, Mr. Turner, and headed to his office. It was probably about my contract, which had expired. Since your contract is up, we're done here. Pack up your stuff and don't ever contact me again, all right? There were many things we needed to discuss, like the systems used in the company or my severance pay. But Mr. Turner just smirked as he showed me the contract. I was shocked to find that the severance pay clause had been removed from the contract. What is this? You didn't even bother to check the contract, thinking it was the same as before, right? That's on you. What? It's true I had signed the contract extending it until the end of the year, and that was after he became the new president. Since the contract looked almost identical to the previous ones, I hadn't read through every line. I never imagined they would remove the severance pay clause. What is going on here? Why would I waste money on severance for someone like you? If you had any brains, you'd have figured that out by now. I felt anger boiling up from deep inside, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. Sure, it's my fault for not reading the contract carefully. I had no intention of arguing about that. But what I couldn't forgive was how Mr. Turner was betraying everything the previous president stood for. Listen, someone like you is worth nothing. No severance after your contract ends. Good riddance. The moment I heard those words, I knew I was completely done with him. I headed straight to grab my laptop. My name is Kyle, and I currently work as a software engineer. It's been 10 years since I started in this industry right after graduating high school. Becoming an engineer wasn't an easy journey. Thank you for having me from today. Oh, you're Kyle, right? I've heard about you. Let's work well together. My parents divorced when I was in middle school, and I was raised by my single mother after that. Since my father had controlled all the finances, he took everything with him when he left. Life after the divorce was extremely hard. Even so, my mother worked tirelessly to support me, and I managed to graduate from middle school. In high school, I worked part-time jobs to cover my own tuition, doing everything I could to ease my mom's burden. But eventually, my mother fell ill and could no longer work. That's when I gave up on college and decided to get a job instead. Since you're a beginner, you need to learn the basics first. There's a lot to remember, like how to write efficient code. Work hard. And you'll get responsibilities soon. Yes, sir. Under the guidance of my senior, Mark, I gradually gained the knowledge and experience I needed as an engineer. But I was the only one in the company who didn't have a college degree. While everyone else joined as college graduates, I was just a high school grad working part-time. Even though we were aiming for the same goal, we were starting from very different places. Because of my position, I was never trusted with major tasks. Even though skill was part of the evaluation, my lack of a college degree was a huge obstacle. I had known ever since they told me to work towards becoming a full-time employee, but it was still tough to keep going. You can definitely do this. I know the company's trust is hard to feel, but I believe in you. Keep pushing. Yes. I'll keep at it. After that, I worked harder than ever to succeed as an engineer. Even when I got home, I studied online materials daily. After a year, I had more knowledge than the new college graduates. Let me introduce you. This is Timothy from the sales department. Nice to meet you. He and I go way back from college. We've been friends for a long time. Pleasure to meet you. I had been delivering solid results at the company, but my lack of a degree still held me back in many ways. In spite of that, Mark was the only one who really looked out for me, and he even introduced me to Timothy, a guy in sales. While that introduction didn't directly impact my work, the fact that Mark would vouch for me like that made me feel trusted. I was grateful for that. Thank you for today. Please invite me out again sometime. After that, Timothy grew fond of me too, and we became close enough that he'd take me out for drinks every now and then. As I grew as an engineer, I was eventually put in charge of a small project. I'm going to gain more experience and eventually become the leader of a major project. That was the current goal. One day after work, Timothy invited me out for drinks again. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm probably going to get really busy soon, so I won't be able to go drinking for a while. Busy? Is there a new project coming up? Not exactly a new project. I'm going independent. I'm starting my own company. It's still a ways off, though. Timothy said this with a big smile, and I was completely shocked because I hadn't heard anything about it before. I knew he was good at his job. Despite his relatively young age, he had a decent position and lived quite comfortably. It means he was probably making good money. But he never showed me any indication that he'd go independent. You're going independent. Yeah. I owe a lot to this company for nurturing me and treating me well, so I didn't want to leave on bad terms. That's why I've been talking with them carefully to ensure a smooth departure. I see. That's incredible. I've never thought about going independent, so I'm both surprised and impressed. Timothy wasn't just thinking about himself, he was also considering the company that had supported him. Sure, that might be expected of any professional. But seeing how he handled everything with care and avoided creating conflict around him was probably the secret to his success. After that, Timothy shared more details about his plans. He wanted to use the connections he'd built to launch an online retail business. That sounds amazing. Best of luck to you. But I've still got a long way to go. There's so much I need to do before I'm ready. I'm planning to work on it alone for the first year after I leave the company, as it's going to take that long to prepare. Couldn't you set things up to run smoothly and then leave the company later? The work I'm in charge of right now isn't something I can juggle with running a business on the side. Plus, it wouldn't be respectful to the company. It was his sincerity that made him so respected and liked by everyone around him. That's what I genuinely felt. We celebrated that night with a big party and had a blast. But after hearing Timothy's story, I too started seriously thinking about going independent. I'd already been wanting to put myself in an environment where I could rely solely on my own skills, and Timothy's story inspired me further. I knew I still had a ways to go before being fully recognized as an engineer. But the desire to test my abilities had been ignited. I can handle projects on my own that are at the same level as the ones I'm working on now. I plan to take on freelance work, build up my portfolio, and eventually establish my own software development company. After consulting with Mark and my superiors, I decided to leave the company at the end of the month. It was a bold move, and I didn't have a solid plan in place. But I felt ready to give it my all. 1 year later, I received an offer from Timothy to work with him. It was an exciting offer, but I found myself in a difficult position. The truth was, I had just successfully gone freelance and started my own company. While it was a wonderful opportunity, I couldn't just go work for someone else now. Thank you for the kind offer. But actually, I just founded my own company. It's still just me, but it's a software development firm. Wow, really? That's incredible. Congratulations. Timothy's reaction was enthusiastic, but I knew it probably wasn't the answer he had been hoping for. He probably expected me to eagerly accept his offer to work at his company, but instead, he was genuinely happy for me. Well then, I guess I should just have your company subcontract the work. It's a software development business, right? Ha! I need you to build our system. Can I count on you? I was originally hoping you'd work as our in-house engineer. But since you're running your own company, we can subcontract you instead. Before I officially founded my company, I had gotten some freelance gigs, but this was by far the biggest project I'd ever been offered. Developing a web application for an e-commerce company. I would be responsible for building everything from the ground up. Even though my company didn't have much of a track record yet, Timothy trusted me. I was determined to give it my all to meet these expectations. I truly felt that from the bottom of my heart. Our relationship continued after that, and I worked on building and maintaining systems, as well as training his engineering team. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, 30 years passed, and Timothy retired as he grew older. The new president was Mr. Turner, who had been serving as the vice president for a few years. Hey, got a minute? Yes? You're on contract, right? Once I take over, I'm planning to cut all the contract employees. So, you might want to start looking for another job. I was suddenly called in and told this. By now, my own company had grown quite a bit, so I could manage even without the work from Timothy's company. Ideally, I'd focus entirely on my business, but I continued working there as an external contractor because of my relationship with Timothy. So, while returning to my own company full-time wouldn't be an issue, the abruptness of the conversation took me by surprise. What do you mean by this? It's pretty sudden. I mean, I don't have money to waste on someone like you. We don't need useless people just playing around on their computers. Mr. Turner said this to my face, without hesitation. I wasn't sure whether it was a cost-cutting move or if he just personally disliked me. But ever since he became vice president, it was clear that he only cared about people's academic backgrounds. He judged everyone's work performance based solely on their educational qualifications. Does this have something to do with the fact that I didn't graduate from college? Wow, you figured it out. Even with a high school diploma, you could grasp that much, huh? I sighed, confirming what I had already suspected. There are people with all kinds of educational backgrounds at this company. Some graduated from lower-ranked universities, some from vocational schools, and others like me only have a high school diploma. There were even a few who were middle school graduates. Timothy had always hired people without regard for their education. In today's world, it's possible to acquire various skills on your own. A college degree doesn't determine a person's worth. But Mr. Turner didn't understand that, and he revered higher education. It probably had something to do with his own academic achievements, but I couldn't help but sigh again. Are you firing me right now? No, I'm not that heartless. I'll extend your contract until the end of the year. Okay. After that, make sure you found yourself another job. Was this his way of being kind? Still, I had given 30 years to this company. Timothy always put the company's growth first, so its scale was much larger than mine. But I had supported the business while managing my own company. It might sound arrogant, but I had done it for Timothy, providing my time and expertise because of everything he had done for me. And now, without knowing any of that, Mr. Turner was coldly cutting me loose. I let out a heavy sigh, realizing that complaining wouldn't change anything, and decided to do my best until my contract ended. However, hey, why don't you go clean the bathroom or something? What? Bathroom cleaning? That's about all someone as useless as you can do, right? It's an order from the president, so get to it. Not just me, but all the employees who were on the chopping block were subjected to harassment from Mr. Turner. Forced to do tasks outside of our job scope like cleaning the bathrooms, excessive nitpicking on our work, and constant lectures. It was endless. Even in that environment, I continued to do the work I was given. Sure, I could have quit right away, but I didn't want to cause trouble for the other employees or the company. Thank you for your help today. Not at all. Feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. Will do. I kept working until the end of the year, and finally, my last day came. Hey! I need to talk to you about something. Come here for a minute. I was called in by Mr. Turner and headed to his office. It was probably about the expiration of my contract. Your contract is up, so we're done here. Pack up your stuff and don't ever contact me again. His high-handed attitude left me completely stunned. What on earth was Mr. Turner thinking? There were still things we needed to discuss, like severance pay and the system I worked on. It couldn't just end with, "Goodbye." What are you talking about? We need to discuss severance and the system. You're not getting a single cent of severance. You useless fool, stop trying to leech off this company's resources. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. Timothy had promised me that I would receive severance pay equivalent to that of a regular employee. It should have been clearly stated in the contract. I wasn't in need of the money, but it was a gesture of appreciation from Timothy. It should be in the contract. The part about severance pay. Are you talking about this contract? With a smirk, Mr. Turner pulled out my contract. It looked like the same one I'd always signed. If you're really getting severance, show me where it says that. He spoke confidently. I took the contract from him and searched for the clause. It had always been written at the very end, so I immediately flipped to the last page, but there was no mention of severance pay. I checked the other pages as well, but it was nowhere to be found. I even pulled up the copy I had saved as a PDF on my phone. To my shock, the severance clause wasn't in my copy either. This meant that Mr. Turner hadn't forged the document. What is going on? You thought it was the same as before and didn't bother to check, huh? That's on you. What? It's true I had signed the contract extending it until the end of the year, and that was after he became the new president. Since it looked almost identical to the previous contracts, I hadn't read through every line. I never imagined they would have removed the severance clause. What is the meaning of this? You really think we'd waste money on severance for someone like you? If you had any brains, you'd have figured that out by now. Anger surged from the depths of my gut, and I had to fight to keep my emotions in check. Yes, it was my fault for not reading the entire contract. I wasn't going to argue about that. But what I couldn't forgive was how Mr. Turner so easily betrayed the principles that Timothy had stood for. Listen, someone like you is worth nothing. No severance after your contract ends. Good riddance. At that moment, I completely lost my temper. I never imagined he was this self-serving, but it showed me exactly the kind of president he was. Understood. Thank you for everything up until now. I said that much, bowed, and returned to my desk. Of course, I wasn't going to let this slide. People who don't act fairly deserve the same treatment in return. I packed my things, said my goodbyes to my colleagues, and left the company. Once I got home, I opened my laptop and got to work on something. The next day, I got a call from Mr. Turner. Hey! What the hell is going on? What do you mean? Calling me so early in the morning and yelling like that, where are your manners? You disabled all the systems we use. That's what's going on. I'd never heard him scream like that before. But I wasn't surprised. I didn't expect him to contact me so soon, but I knew this was coming. Of course, I did. You didn't renew my contract. Huh? Contract? Wow, you really don't know anything, do you? And you're the president? I couldn't help but smirk as I said that. Mr. Turner, with his inflated pride, was now screaming at me even louder because of my attitude. Do you even know what I'm doing? I don't know what you're talking about. You were always just messing around on the computer. So why would you have the authority to disable the system? Nobody else knew about this. How could this be happening? Clearly, Mr. Turner had no idea what I'd been doing for the company. He must have been told everything when he took over from Timothy. Either he completely forgot, or he just brushed it off without paying attention. Either way, now he was panicking because the company's system was down. The systems affected included employee management tools and accounting software. We have tons of remote workers, and we've got a pile of invoices coming in at the end of the month. This is going to be a disaster. Say something. As the CEO of the company that developed the system, I'm willing to renegotiate the contract. We could even switch to a buyout model instead of a usage fee like before. But, of course, you'll have to apologize on your knees first. What? I said it clearly. I knew this wasn't going to end without consequences. I had already informed the management and accounting teams, but if this got back to Timothy, my reputation could take a hit. Not renewing the contract and restricting access to the system was perfectly within my rights. But I couldn't help wondering if Timothy would be disappointed in me. That thought lingered. Still, I couldn't forgive what Mr. Turner had done. You've gone too far. I'm coming over right now, so get to the office. I didn't intend to keep the system offline forever, so I headed to the company later that afternoon. Hey, I've been waiting for you. Let's head to the president's office. To my surprise, it was Timothy waiting for me in the lobby. He must have heard about the situation and rushed over to the company. I had my reasons, but I wasn't sure how much Timothy knew or what he was thinking. We both stayed silent as we made our way to the president's office. Excuse me. Timothy knocked and entered the president's office, where Mr. Turner stood, rigid and imposing. I sincerely apologize. I deeply regret the disrespectful way you were treated, and I'd like to ask for your forgiveness. To my astonishment, Timothy was the one apologizing to me. Wait a second. What's going on? Why is Timothy apologizing? Mr. Turner was desperate to stop him from bowing his head. It was clear that Mr. Turner had thought Timothy would be on his side, angry with me, and backing him up. However, the reality was quite the opposite. Timothy, please, lift your head. You. Stop acting like that. You should be apologizing with him. What kind of nonsense are you spouting? In all my 40 years of knowing Timothy, I had never seen him this angry. The intensity of his fury left Mr. Turner visibly shaken. The atmosphere in the room instantly became tense. Don't make me angrier than I already am. Who do you think is responsible for this mess? Well, you see. Trying to force things through with an authoritarian attitude, without taking responsibility for your actions. I never thought you were this kind of person. If I had known, I never would have appointed you as president. But before anything else, you need to apologize. Timothy spoke in a low, menacing tone, and Mr. Turner, visibly deflated, turned to me and bowed his head. What is it? First of all, I'm sorry about the contract. Mr. Turner mumbled an apology for his actions. Perhaps he thought I was upset about not receiving the severance, but at that moment, I was more curious about Timothy's reaction. How was Timothy going to handle this? So, how do you plan to take responsibility for your actions? You're not a child, and certainly not an ordinary employee. You've caused damage to this company. How do you intend to make amends? Timothy had completely locked his sights on Mr. Turner, who had gone pale. He was likely searching for the right answer, but nothing seemed to come to mind. That made sense because he'd always operated with a self-centered mindset, crushing anything he didn't like with force. It was hard to imagine someone like him offering the sincerity Timothy was expecting. We could renegotiate a new contract. I'll be sure to offer a higher fee, and the usage cost will be more than before. That's not what I'm talking about. Timothy's voice echoed throughout the president's office, and Mr. Turner's face contorted in fear. He had clearly stepped on a landmine and realized too late what a mistake he'd made. Timothy was truly furious now. If you don't understand the gravity of your actions, let me make it clear. You're fired. I'm not leaving you in charge of this company any longer. What? You've got to be joking, right? Do you think this is the time for jokes? If you honestly believe that, your head must be in the clouds. I heard you look down on those who are high school graduates, but it seems your brain is smaller than a microbe's. Timothy's sharp words left Mr. Turner completely speechless. Even I hadn't expected the word fired to come out of Timothy's mouth. But it was proof of just how serious Timothy was about this. What you did is utterly unforgivable. You used your position as president to wield your power, not for the company's benefit, but to satisfy your own selfish desires. Someone like that has no business running a company. Please, wait. Can't you reconsider? You can't just fire me like this. I admit what I did was a grave mistake, but you understand it, don't you? What you did is unforgivable, and I have no intention of forgiving you. Take responsibility and leave this company. As Timothy said this, Mr. Turner collapsed to his knees. Despite his usual domineering attitude, he began sobbing loudly and prostrating himself before Timothy. Please, I beg you. Can't you forgive me? Do you think crying and begging for forgiveness will make everything right? Take responsibility for your actions like a man. Even though Mr. Turner continued to apologize and plead, Timothy didn't budge. After that, Timothy led me out of the president's office and into a nearby meeting room. I'm truly sorry about everything that happened. I was the one who made him president, so this is partly my responsibility as well. I never imagined he would turn out to be like this. I'm really sorry. Timothy had already apologized to me when we entered the president's office, and I never blamed him for any of this. There was no need for an apology, but this was Timothy's way of showing sincerity. You don't need to apologize, Timothy. You're not at fault here. You've helped me more than you know. Without you, this company wouldn't be what it is today. It was unforgivable to treat someone like you, an indispensable part of the company, with such disrespect. Timothy spoke with tears welling up in his eyes as he expressed his gratitude to me. You built our system for a fraction of the market price, and you let us use it for less than 1/10 of the usual cost. When the company grew, you dedicated your time to training our engineering team. You even helped with the programming classes we started recently. For 30 years, this company thrived because you were there, Timothy. Even during tough times for the business, or when I was dealing with personal issues, you were always there to support me. It's because of your presence that we've come this far. Thank you, truly. Timothy grasped my hand firmly, looking me in the eye as he spoke. Seeing him like that brought tears to my eyes as well. But I owed so much to Timothy too. You taught me how to run a business and introduced me to clients. I'm just as indebted to you. I don't think I could ever repay all you've done for me. Hearing this, Timothy smiled and replied, hearing that makes everything I've done feel worthwhile. Thank you, truly. And I'm sorry again for everything that happened. I know I'm in no position to ask, but could we continue working together? Though Timothy seemed apologetic, I already had my answer. Of course. I'm looking forward to working with you again. We shook hands firmly, reaffirming our partnership. In the end, Mr. Turner was fired and forced out of the company. Timothy's company was large, and word about Mr. Turner spread quickly, both inside and outside the industry. It seemed he couldn't find a new job. Having lost his job, he was abandoned by his family, and now lives alone in obscurity. Most of the salary he had earned over the years had been squandered, and whatever little savings he had left were taken by his ex-wife for child support. It was a fitting end for someone who had caused so much harm, but it was clear he was living a miserable life. As for me, I've been focusing on running my own company while maintaining my strong friendship with Timothy. Timothy has returned to his role as president and is now dedicated to mentoring the next company leader. We've brought in some great talent. They're interested in the president position, so I'm taking my time to develop them, he told me. That's wonderful. I'd love to learn more from you again. I, too, have been thinking that it might soon be time to pass my company on to someone else. I'll need to learn those skills from Timothy when the time comes. Meeting Timothy was one of the most significant events of my life. Of course, I can't say that everything in life has been easy. There have been struggles, challenges, and moments where I felt cornered emotionally. But every time, I would look to Timothy and think, I want to work as hard as he does. And Timothy, in turn, felt the same way about me. Life is unpredictable, and we often don't realize how much we are helping others. That's why I believe it's important to have confidence in what we're doing now. When you join hands with those who cherish you and, in turn, cherish them as well. If you live wholeheartedly, focusing on what's in front of you, a better tomorrow and future will surely await. I've taken this lesson to heart, and I plan to live my life by it moving forward.